Remember my review of Star Tropics? In it, I mentioned how Crystalis has a much smoother control over Star Tropics, and that you can move in multiple directions. Well, I've gotten a few requests to review Crystalis, and although I wanted to do it anyway, I decided to push it up on the calendar. And here we are. Crystalis takes place after a massive war, in which pretty much everything is wiped out. In October 1997 this occurs, I might add, so methinks this happens in an alternate dimension. Survivors build a tower in the sky, of all things, and somehow this prevents bad things from happening. 100 years later, beasts rule the world, civilians live in remote villages, and your character comes out of what appears to be a cryogenic sleep in the town of Leaf. It's up to you to help the locals and see if you can suppress the creatures and save humanity. Because this is a video game. Crystalis is an action RPG that is very similar in style to Zelda. You move through towns, purchasing upgraded gear, finding magical spells to sling, and searching for key items that allow you to proceed to the next area. You press B to thrust out your sword, and A to cast spells. B also allows you to use any items that you might have picked up. So with all that said, you can probably figure out that you'll be traveling from town to town, helping the citizens, and defeating any creatures that you run into. The game is set up into hubs of sorts. Not until you complete everything available in the current area can you move into the next one, entering that town and seeing what kind of trouble they're in. You do get a teleport spell fairly early into the game, so you're never permanently forced out of the area, and you will need to backtrack at times, whether it's to complete a quest or just to simply buy discounted items instead of the inflated prices found in late game towns. One of the biggest differences between games like Zelda and Crystalis is the fact that you gain actual experience points while playing. Increasing the level gives you higher maximum health and magic pools, along with slightly higher attack and defensive stats. It's fairly easy to earn experience, as you'll probably level up in your quest to gain more gold to buy better gear. There are 16 total levels, and the experience required to hit the next level is always shown at the bottom of the screen in the status bar. It makes it easy to know if you should keep pushing for that level up, or retreat back to town to heal first. Combat works easily enough. You fling your sword ahead of you, doing damage to enemies and flinging them backwards. If you can manage to pin an enemy against a wall, you can defeat them easily. In addition, you can hold down the B button to charge up your sword. This has multiple uses. For one, it's a ranged attack, with its power dependent on how long you charge the sword. The charging must be done while standing still, as while you move around, the charging will pause. Depending on what items you have in your inventory, you can boost the power up to a level of 3. Level 1 is a simple attack, Level 2 is much more powerful, and Level 3 uses MP in order to perform a heavy area blast. The game is theoretically completable without these ranged attacks, however, I personally relied on them a lot, especially in late game situations. Enemies will do heavy damage, and some thugs, like the opposing soldiers, can easily strike you before you get within range. Sure, you can skip a lot of battles, especially when maxed out on experience and don't need any more gold, but some enemies will seek you out and annoy you until someone falls. So battle is something you'll always have to be ready for. Attacking isn't the only use of your power-up swords. You can also use level 2 attacks to destroy specific walls. The walls that can be blown up are clearly different than regular walls, so it's easy enough to figure them out. But here's where I introduce the fact that you eventually get 4 different elemental swords. You start off with the Sword of Wind, and eventually get the Swords of Fire, Water, and Thunder, with Thunder being the most powerful and also best ranged weapon due to its spread attacks. Also, not only do different types of walls require different swords to be crushed, some enemies are also shielded against certain elements. Because of this, you'll need to be swapping swords quite frequently. Actually, it's not just the swords you'll be switching between. You'll also probably want to flip between the different elemental bracelets, as these are what dictate how much you can power up each sword. And that brings me to probably my biggest complaint with the game. You need to be accessing that menu quite a bit. Some areas have one set of enemies that are invulnerable to one sword and weak against another, while a different enemy in the same room is the exact opposite. You'll know when an enemy isn't taking damage because you'll hear a pinging sound when you strike it. So you might defeat one enemy, switch swords, kill the next one, switch back, and repeat for a while. Yes, I know, other games are guilty of this exact same reliance on entering the menu. I've been replaying a bunch of Dragon Warrior games, and the NES games require you to enter the menu just to talk to people. Mega Man games, especially the early ones when the secondary weapons are much more useful, also rack up menu time. I dunno. Crystalis just feels a bit overboard in this matter. I feel like using start to bring up the menu and select a hot swap between swords would have been a better option, instead of what the game uses, of start bringing up a small stat screen and select showing you your inventory. It would have alleviated my pain with this instantly. Sure, I would still have to enter the menu to swap equipment or spells, but it wouldn't have killed the momentum of the game. Spells. I should chat a bit about those. All of the spells are support in nature, since ranged attacks are done with your sword's charge shots. These are given to you by NPCs as you move through the game, and you would get a recovery spell early on. Other spells include removing status effects, paralyzing enemies and NPCs, speaking with 4 elders through telepathy, and a shield that nullifies any damage, among other things. Most spells are required at certain points in the game, such as paralyzing a guard so you can reach a queen's chamber, or changing your appearance so that a town of men-hating women will speak to you. Telepathy can be nice since you might get hints on where you need to go or what you need to do next. Recovery is the healing spell, and although useful, holy hell does it eat up your NP. The way it works is that the longer you hold down A, the more health you recover, at the expense that your MP will drain for as long as you hold it down. It can easily drain your magic pools within seconds if you aren't careful. There are late game items that both recover your HP and NP while standing still, and I caught myself doing this often just to save resources, but dang if early on your MP is emptied quickly. You can bring items like magic rings to restore MP and medical herbs to restore HP, but the herbs only restore a small amount of health and you can only carry 8 items at a time. Personally, I would rather have the magic rings and herbs, which is what I carried in the later parts of the game. And you will need the recover spell to remove status effects, because this game loves status effects. Early on, you'll probably want to carry 3 or more antidotes at a time, as the enemies in the first cave love poisoning you, even if it doesn't feel like you've been touched. The game also pauses and tells you in a window that you've been poisoned, although this window does come up every time you are given an ailment. I feel like SNK went a bit overboard on the ailments, at least in the earlier parts of the game. They are as bad later on, with things like paralysis halting your ability to charge your sword, and petrification to freeze you for a few seconds, but at least by then, you have the health and spells to power through it. Overall, the game has a very smooth feel to it, and other than the constant sword switching, also has a fast pace. Enemies usually die quickly, you move around with a purpose, and speaking to NPCs is done by simply bumping into them. You'll need to pay attention and talk to everyone, as NPCs will usually have important clues or general things to say. Unless you're speaking to one of the women in this town, who hate guys for some reason. Some of the things they say sum up my dating life. But still, it's good for a chuckle. However, even though the villagers have good things to say to you, I got stuck often in late game areas. This is because the game gets really cryptic with its puzzles. This happens right around when you get to the ocean and have to surf around a bit on a dolphin. How do you get this dolphin? Speak to the queen a few times, and it will appear from nowhere in an area where it had not been before. Heal it up using a key item, and it will allow you to ride on its back. I had been to that area multiple times and not seen a dolphin before, so without a guide I never would have went back there, considering it was at a dead end. And that's not all. Some extra items require a bit of backtracking that you probably never would have thought about doing. And you'll have to use the change spell to sneak past a few rebel guards to see the elders, although the game never tells you this. And best of all, in a tavern, you're supposed to paralyze a random guard to make the NPC speak to you. Yeah, I'm sure with enough trial and error you'll be able to figure things out, but there's only so much patience that I have in my older age anymore before I say screw it, where's a guide? The sound in the game is actually pretty good for a 1990 SNK game. You don't normally place SNK with RPGs, as I always think fighting games, but they did a great job here. The music, for the most part, has some fantastic tunes, with cheery, peaceful songs that play out in towns, and adventurous themes with great drum beats in the field. The caverns, on the other hand, kinda suck. The song loops way too quickly, and although it starts off harrowing, it's just too short to be any good. It made me want to clear dungeons as quickly as possible to get back to the great field music. The graphics are well done as well. Your hero looks good, even though he holds the shield a bit awkwardly. The fields have a bunch of color, and the enemies, although small, have a good amount of detail to them. Again, the caverns take a major hit, with all of them looking about the same. I get it, they're often just built into mountains and stuff, so they are made of rock, but at least a little bit of other detail would have been nice. Crystalis is a surprisingly fun game from a company that isn't really known for RPGs. Sure, it can be a bit cryptic in the second half of the game, and the end boss is ridiculously easy, but you'll have a fun time with this one if you enjoy Zelda. Great design overall, a system that lets you save anywhere in town or in the field, and smooth gameplay ensures you'll have a great experience. Final score? 6 out of 7. This is Reaper. Happy fragging.